This is Unbound, the English language podcast of Tel Aviv University. Please welcome your host, Aharoni, Tel Aviv University's graduate, member of the Board of Governors, lecturer, writer, and veteran diplomat.
Welcome to yet another episode of Tau Unbound. I'm Aharoni, your host, and it gives me a great pleasure to host today in our studio two students from the Tisch School of Film and Television. We have with us Michal Rudnick, who is the head of marketing for the Tel Aviv International Student Film Festival. We'll talk about that. And Dolev Amitai, who is, let me get the exact title, Director of Foreign Affairs and Guests Coordinator for the festival.
Nice to
It's
meet
a pleasure to have you both.
Pleasure to be here.
And I must say in full disclosure that my son Adam is working with them as part of the team that produces the festival. And only because we didn't want to be accused of nepotism, he's not in the studio right now with them.
True.
And but I must say, before I embarrass you, that my son loves working with you, and he really thinks you're both going places, and he just can't speak, more highly of both of you and the rest of the team, and is really enjoying spending time with you, producing this festival. And I have had to become more involved because of him. So, Michal, let's start with you. Tell us a little bit about your background, where you're from, where were you raised, how did you end up here?
I'm Michal. Originally, I'm from Meitar, which is next to Be'er Sheva, like a small suburb. What was the rest of the question? How I was raised?
So you were born in Meitar?
I was born in Philadelphia. And I
Okay,
had a
now
few
that's
stops on the
wait,
way.
that's getting
Yes.
interesting.
Okay.
What were you doing in Philadelphia?
My father was then a shaliach of the Sochnut, the Jewish agency. And I was born when my parents were living there as shlichim, or my father was more of a shaliach.
So those of you who don't understand the word shaliach, it means emissary. It's basically a job of someone who's being sent from Israel by a Jewish organization to connect with a certain community. In your case, was Philadelphia. Are you still in touch with the community in Philadelphia?
My parents are a bit in touch. I mean, I was only there until I was 1, so it's been a while since we've lived there, but they have some connections that they are keeping,
And then you came back, you grew up in Meitar.
most
And
of the time.
Did you go to high school in Meitar?
I went to high school in Yerucham, Midrashiyat Amit Kama. It's a religious school for girls. Great experience. I had a great time. I love my high school.
And was there an emphasis on filmmaking?
No, there wasn't any filmmaking classes, it wasn't something that existed. I did study art, and in general, it was a very creative, environment, but not specifically.
So when did you develop a passion for filmmaking?
Truly, I love watching television, and I think that's like the biggest connection. I just really enjoy watching, even more television maybe than film, but just like, I do love like the arts of screen or whatever, but I do enjoy like television and watching, and I think that was the biggest connection.
Wow, that's amazing. Now, Dolev, you also have a foreign chapter in your upbringing, right? Tell us about that.
I have a few. My mom also was shaliach, first in Manchester, England, when I was really small, when I was a baby. And then we moved to Arizona in the States when I was 13, between 13 and 15-ish. And so I spent some time abroad. That's why my English is...
So what part of Arizona were you in? Phoenix?
In Scottsdale, but it's the suburb of
Scottsdale?
Phoenix, yeah.
What years were you there?
Middle school, from 7th until 9th grade.
Wow, that's incredible. I know the community pretty well there, and it's a wonderful community.
Yeah, I loved it there.
Because when I served in Los Angeles, Arizona was part of my jurisdiction, so I would frequently visit Phoenix and Tucson, and I still have many friends in both communities. So that's incredible. So when did you return to Israel? How old were you?
So I returned when I was about 15-ish, just for high school in Israel. And Yeah, that's it. I mean, I was 15, and then we moved back to Hod HaSharon when we got back. And then after I graduated from high school, my parents decided to buy a house in Pardes Chana, so we moved norther in Israel, and they've been living there since. I moved back to here.
To Tel Aviv. And when did
Yeah.
you discover that you're interested in the world of television and film?
So my father is a graduate of Bet V. He studied acting. He since moved to making music, but since I was young, he kept showing me films that weren't always appropriate for children, but that was the way I discovered cinema. And
Do you remember any of those first movies that made an impression on you as a young person?
yeah, I think it was he showed me like The Matrix and The Godfather when I was like 8, 9. I remember them making a pretty big impression on me. Also, like
You know what? What's the
Pixar
movie?
films and stuff.
Pixar films.
Yeah,
The Godfather is pretty heavy to show.
yeah.
But you know what? Good film education. You know what was the first movie I think I exposed my son to? Adam, your colleague, The Big Lebowski.
Of course.
Yeah, that
which-
was
It's
another
very
one.
educational
Yeah,
also.
like the Coen Brothers, like Fargo, and
Yeah, and we have a special connection to Los Angeles, and The Big Lebowski takes place in LA in a neighborhood that we know very well, because Adam's aunt lives in the Marina, and The Big Lebowski takes place in Culver City, Mar Vista area. We even know the bowling alley. So you both are passionate about filmmaking and television, and as you call it, the screen arts. And now you're in a position of importance because you two are centerpieces in the team that is producing the Tel Aviv International Student Film Festival, which started during my second year at what is now the Tisch School, 1986. I was not involved in the festival, I must say. I wasn't good enough to be recruited to work on the festival. But I remember very vividly the first festival. Some of the folks that I'm in touch with until this very day, like Shuki Friedman and others, produced the festival. And the guest of honor was Menachem Golan, who was a very famous Israeli filmmaker, producer, who at the time in the 1980s really restored the glory days of the film industry in Los Angeles. Believe it or not, his film company, Canon Films, used to produce between 45 to 50 feature films a year, which was more than the studios. It was insane. And there, of course, there were not movies of the caliber of The Godfather. So, Michal, tell me, how did you connect with the festival? Tell us about your job with the festival.
Like since the beginning, like how did I get involved in general, maybe in the festival? Well, today the festival is basically also built of a lot of volunteers, student volunteering and doing all sorts of jobs. So as a first year, I went to volunteer actually at Dolev's department. I was in charge of something with like guests, but it changed pretty quickly because of COVID. So I was just in touch with them and like in charge of maybe sending them care packages or something. My second year, I already produced a big project of the festival. It was the Filmbus. It's a big project we actually have like a real bus that's all wrapped with like our festival posters, and it goes around all Israel and has like screenings each night at different places under the sky.
So if people are listening to us right now and they're interested in seeing the bus,
Of course.
what do they have to do to find
First of
the
all, they
bus?
can follow the Filmbus Project Instagram. I think it also has Facebook, but Instagram is the best. And also follow us on social media.
And what's the address?
TISFF. Our pages are called TISFF on Facebook, on Instagram, on TikTok.
So here you have it to our listeners and our viewers. TISFF, Tel Aviv International Student Film Festival. And Dolev, if I'm not mistaken, it's one of the largest festivals of its kind in the world, right? How many countries participate?
This year, I believe we received films from many, many countries and accepted, I think, around from 14 countries, which each country also has a few schools, for example. So we have about 37 films from abroad in the international competition, and many of them will be coming to the festival to attend it. So that's
And how many? So tell us about how did you connect with the festival? What drew you to the festival?
it was mostly similar to Michal. I joined in the first year and volunteered. I was on the film bus and on the guest department as well. And then just from there, I really like the festival. I mean, it's the best event we have in our school. And then I just started moving up. I managed the experimental competition for 2 years, for the past 2 years. And this year, I thought this would be a job I'd really want to do.
And tell us about this year's guests. Who's coming this year?
Ooh, this is nice. So we have 7 really, really wonderful guests of honor this year. The first one is Jessica Hausner. She's an Austrian director. She just had her newest film premiere in the official competition in Cannes, which we will screen in the Israeli premiere in Israel. We also have Christian Petzold. He's a very famous German director whose new film we will also screen an Israeli premiere. We will have Diego Garcia. He's a really talented cinematographer, shooting both indie films in America and also art house films in the world. We will have Jacob Schulzinger. He's an editor for Lars von Trier, for Ruben Östlund, who just won his second Palme d'Or in Cannes last year. We will have Agnieszka Smozinska. She's a famous Polish director. We will have Andrew Dominic, who made The Assassination of Jesse James and Blonde, which is available on Netflix. And of course, we'll have Larry Kazanov, who will be the president of the festival. He's a famous Hollywood producer who, thanks to you, he will be attending this year.
And he is known for Mortal Kombat and True Lies and his partnership with James Cameron. And I must say, Larry is a very good friend of mine for many, many years. And I think you're all in for a very special treat because he's also a great speaker, very funny. And I should, if I may shamelessly plug in the masterclass that I will be moderating with Larry Kazanoff on June 28th at the Tel Aviv Cinematheque at 3:30 p.m. You're all invited. Michal, so how would you define, as a marketing person, the target audience for the Tel Aviv International Student Film Festival?
Well, I think the target audience would be people that are interested in arts in general and maybe film specifically. I think a lot of people are not even aware to the short film as an art, and there's nowhere to see it. So we target mostly, I don't even want to say people from Tel Aviv, because it won't be true. I mean, it really is open for everyone that is interested to absorb, to see and watch films in general.
And do you feel you have? And I know every marketing person would like to have more budget. That's a given.
Mm-hmm.
I have not met a marketing person in my life that said I have enough resources for proper marketing, right? But setting this aside, what would you like to do in your department that you're unable to do for whatever reason right now? And the reason I'm asking this is because we may have someone listening to us right now that wants to help you.
I think that money isn't necessarily not necessarily a budget, but you really do need people that are invested. I think that's sometimes hard to find, people that really want to give the time and are serious about it. I think in general, you can do a lot of things organically when it comes to marketing and advertising. A lot of our advertising are organically posted and not necessarily promoted with money. So I think it's all about like having people that want to invest with creative minds, just wanting to do creative things in general.
So I think what you're describing is there's a term that they use in marketing to describe it. It's called affinity marketing. So in other words, you're looking for people that will connect emotionally with your mission statement, and that will develop a very high level of loyalty, which will then mobilize them to act on your behalf. And I think that's a wonderful. In fact, in one of my classes, I teach the case study of the Grateful Dead. Have you ever heard of the Grateful Dead? The Grateful Dead was a rock band that was active from the 1960s until the 1990s, and they were famous for not so much for the big hit, and they had several big hits, but they were known for their ability to create what's called fandom. They were able to communicate directly with their fans, and they created this phenomenon of people following them from one live performance to another. Those people were called the Deadheads. And I think that what you're trying to do is something similar. You're trying to create a cult following for the festival. And I must give it to you guys because, just if you look at the longevity of the festival, it's amazing that you've been able to produce the festival every year, different team, since 1986. Dolev, what would you, I'm sure you've seen some of the movies that are going to be shown.
The feature films?
Yes.
Yeah, I've seen all of them.
And some of the shorts also.
Yes.
So what can you tell us that will, entice people's appetite, their interest in the festival in terms of the kind of films that we're going to be featuring this year?
So I can speak more about the feature films, but I think this year we're going to have such a variety of different films. I mean, we're going to have the Israeli premieres of those big films that premiered in the festivals in Europe, the more art films, and then we're going to have the more, like, let's say, Hollywood films, thanks to Larry, or like we're going to screen True Lies from a 35 millimeter print. We're also going to have...
and True Lies featuring, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. Yeah. And I should mention to our listeners and our viewers that right now, Arnold Schwarzenegger is in the middle of this hysterical comeback, right? He has a show on Netflix called Fubar, and he has a documentary series about his life. And so he's going to be the star of the movie, and Larry will be talking about True Lies, right?
No, he will be talking about Mortal Kombat.
Mortal Kombat, yeah. All right.
Which he feels much more connected since he's been producing the series since the first film in 1995, and it's still ongoing. There was a new film released, I think, last year. So he's been pretty involved with that. So I feel like we're going to have a really a large variety of different films, documentary films. We're going to have American indies. We're going to have the Hollywood big blockbusters, and we're going to have the small, intimate European films. So everyone has their own, different thing that they might like. We're also going to screen a short program of experimental films. We're bringing film copies from abroad. So a lot of them are only available on film. You can't watch them at home. So we're working to bring those.
Wonderful. Now, Michal, Dolev mentioned at least 14 countries represented. Any exotic places that you can think of you'd like to share with our listeners and our viewers?
We have to discuss it maybe together. Which exotic countries? I know there's a film maybe from Colombia.
We have a few films from South America. We have one from Colombia, one from Argentina, one from Brazil. We also have two students who are Chinese who study in NYU, they're in the digital media competition. They made VR projects, so their projects are going to be in the.
And that's a strong connection that we have with NYU. Tel Aviv U is strongly connected with NYU, and I'm a proof to that. Connection. Also because we also have both film schools are named after a Tisch. In the case of New York, it's Larry Tisch, and in the case of Tel Aviv, it's Steve Tisch, his nephew. but it's the same family. And of course, Tel Aviv and New York are very similar in the role they play in their countries. So NYU and Tel Aviv U are very strongly connected. I wanted to ask you about what's your expectation from the festival in terms of audience and so on. What would be considered a success in your eyes, Michal?
I think a success would be that at least most of like the program would have audience, as much as like, maybe even sold out events. Of course, it's like ideal.
You'd like people to look at content
Yes,
not only as a form of art,
of course.
but also as fun, right? You want people to look at content the same way some people look at art. As art is there not only to develop critical thinking, but also to embellish our lives. And there's nothing wrong with enjoying a good television show, right? There's nothing wrong with, not every piece of content has to be loaded and charged with social and political meaning. And you know what? When I was a student at the Tel Aviv School of Film and Television, I felt very much the same as you do. I connected more with more communicative content than, let's say, avant-garde, as Dolev described it. Let me ask you one last question, Dolev, because I could talk to you for hours, but we're running out of time. Let me ask you, Dolev, what would be considered a success in your eyes?
I feel similarly to Michal. I think since the tradition of the festival is to invite the students from abroad, we're going to have a lot of them attend this year. So I really feel like also having all the screenings and the master classes and the Q&As to be completely sold out, that would be wonderful. But also to have this connection between the students in Israel. We have a few competitions in the festival, so we also have competitions just for Israeli students. So having, and not just from the Tel Aviv University, from all the film schools in Israel. So I feel like having them, all the Israeli students and the foreign students meet and be able to share ideas and to just get in contact with each other.
Now, to those people that are listening and watching us right now that are unable to come to Israel and physically participate, is there a way to connect remotely with the content that we're producing?
I believe not. Not this
So
year.
this is an in-person only festival. Okay, so I would urge the people that are unable to physically come to Israel and participate to follow the festival online and even create a Google alert under TISFF so that you can get all the information about the festival to your inbox immediately, and that way they'll be able to follow. Well, Michal and Dolev, thank you so much for being with us and telling us about the festival. I'd like to wish you much success, and I'm looking forward to my master class with Larry Kazanoff. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And to our listeners and viewers back home, until our next episode, goodbye from Tel Aviv.
This is Unbound, the English language podcast of Tel Aviv University. Please welcome your host, Aharoni, Tel Aviv University's graduate, member of the Board of Governors, lecturer, writer, and veteran diplomat.